and what their nature is, so that we can govern things better. So now there's almost 350 different religious organizations registered, or are not registered, that are just running their operations without any registration. So besides these religious organizations, there's a lot of people with just personal religious views that may not fall into any particular religious bucket.
Энэ гэмтэргийн шинжтэй үйлдэлүүдэд хүртгэх энэ байдлууд бол Монгол улсад бас тоо хэмжээний хувьд ихээхэн өндөр үзүүлэлттэй болж байна гэж гэнтэг. Би энэ үзүүлэлтээс хамаарат одоо Монгол улсын шашин шүтэх, Монгол улсын хууль ёсоор орсон суугаа шүтэх, шашны байгууллагын хүндрэл үүсэж байгаа таалууд юунд тавих зохицуулт харилцааны тухай хуулийг зайлшгүй шинжилсэн найруулгын төсөл нь бол хүний шашин
So we're trying to write a new law to regulate all of this around regulation of religion. So we are requiring that registration take place for all of these religious organizations, and then we're trying also to understand the assets of these different religious organizations, so that we can understand according to the law what's happening here. So I've got a few slides that I've prepared to talk about this registration process. So we're just talking about what the process is for registering different religious organizations. So we've got some slides in English, so you can see what we're talking about. So what kind of laws do we have for registration? So there's the law on relations between the state and religious organizations, a general law on state registration, etc. There's quite a few of these different laws. You can see them on the slide. There's quite a few of these legal regulations in place. In 2009, there was a registration law set up, and the general law on registrations. Okay, but I guess I'm out of time, so we'll move forward. So I guess I have 2 more minutes. So I've got the. I mean, you can just read it on the slide here. So maybe we'll just answer any questions that people have. Okay, thanks for listening. So until the slides are ready, I'll just introduce myself. In 1949, the Mongolian National University was set up. They have bachelor, master's, and PhD degrees. We have about 1,800 teachers and scholars. and there's 8 different colleges. And so that's the school that I work for. So this is one of the first universities set up in Mongolia. And we're trying to, prepare future scholars in Mongolia. And so freedom is a really important topic for us ever since the transition to democracy. So religious freedom is a part of that whole conversation. We've had religious freedom since 1990. So in terms of this topic of religious freedom, from 1990, we've been studying this in religious studies, and we've been teaching students about it ever since 1990. So we have about 100 students in each semester taking this class, and they learn about the international legal documents, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all of these kind of international agreements that have been set up for studying, for guaranteeing religious freedom, and we learn about that. So all of these different agreements are supported by the Mongolian Constitution. So having the right to worship or not to worship is guaranteed in the Constitution. So when you think about World War II, obviously there were a lot of big cases that tested religious freedom. People were persecuted because of their religion, and we talk about this with our students. And we do have these kind of issues in Mongolian history. In 1937, there was significant repression of Mongolian churches and monks. They were persecuted because of their religion, and we talk about this. We have workshops, seminars, and videos that we show to the students to help them understand their own history this way. In 1937. Yeah, it was a bad time in Mongolian history. So there was about 1,000 churches and 18,000 monks that were persecuted through this time. So in world history, there are issues of religious persecution, but in Mongolian history, there are also some unfortunate incidents that we want the students to understand. So this kind of persecution, we need to learn from our history. So from so we have these United Nations documents. We have the Mongolian Constitution, all of which are supposed to support religious rights, but it is, ever since World War II, this is something that is really important for the entire history of the world. So from 1961, we joined the United Nations, and in 1961 we were admitted to the United Nations. And I tell my students that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, all of these international commitments that Mongolia has made over the years. So they're supposed to be guaranteeing that everybody has the right to choose their own religion. So in article number 2, when I teach it to my students, every everyone is entitled to human rights without distinction of any kind: race, color, sex, language, religion, any opinion. They shouldn't be persecuted based on any of those bases. And everybody has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. And men and women, without any limitation, have the right to marry and to found a family, regardless of their religious views. And that's in Article 16. And everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, according to Article 18. And this includes the freedom to change your religion. And I try to help my students to understand that. And in that International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, we've signed onto this one as well. It's in the Constitution and other laws of Mongolia, there should be no religious persecution. In 1974, we agreed to this Civil and Political Rights Covenant. In Mongolia, according to the Constitution, religious observance or non-observance is protected. So in 2024, there was a So in 1924, 49, 60, and 92, there were different versions of the Constitution written. And in the 1924 Constitution, they even talked about complete freedom to believe in religion, but they talked about separating political matters and religious matters. So they were talking about religious and separation of religion from the state. Yeah, so they were trying to make a very secular state at the time. So citizens of the country should enjoy the same rights regardless of race, religion, male or female. It did say that in 1924. The representatives of any party are elected, and those who are not eligible to be elected are priests and monks, who must be present at their monasteries, or former princes. So it actually says that they're not allowed to hold office. So in the 1940 Constitution, it says if you're 18 years of age, male or female, regardless of religion, origin, but it also says monks, and non-government kings and dukes. Except for so then in 1960 it talked about equal rights. So it didn't talk anymore about monks like it had in the previous one. So from 1926. So there's been from 1934 they had a law on separation of church and state, and today there's relations between the state and church in Mongolia regulated within several frameworks. So there's the Constitution, there's a law on church-state relations from 1993, and then national security is always looked at on some of these things as well. But it still says that there's no persecution allowed. There's other laws that have an impact on this. There's a stamp duty law. There's the registration laws. There's procedures for verifying names of legal entities and making seals and signs and things like this. All of these can have an impact on how religious organizations are allowed to operate. There's procedures for maintaining state records of legal entities. In the Constitution from 1992, the state respects the religion and the religion respects the state, is what it says. And state institutions cannot conduct religious activities, it says in the Constitution. And relations between the state and churches shall be regulated by law. So So it's still putting the government in kind of a secularist environment, trying to be very separate between church and state. The respect of religion by the state means that the state does not discriminate against religion, treats it equally, and does not force religion. So in the law on human rights and freedoms, from 1993, there's a state-church relations. The purpose of this law is to guarantee the freedom of religion of citizens. And there's a freedom of religion section. Adherence or non-adherence to any religion is a matter of a person's belief. It's forbidden to force a citizen to practice or not to practice. Discriminating, insulting, and divisive activities on the basis of religious are prohibited. So these are all different parts of the law. There's also educational laws that have to do with religious organizations. So the schools. There's not supposed to have religious training, religious rituals, or other activities with foreign funding and organization that have a negative impact on society. So that's in the Education Act. There's so around all of these things, like what about Facebook and social media and all of these things? How do they have to do with religious? There's of course there's a lot of discussion in our society about these things. How is Facebook impacting? And how is it leading to a lack of understanding among religions is something that we've been having workshops and discussions about. And there's a lot of conflicts and misunderstandings still happening. There's several of these, these laws and concepts, and the Human Rights Declaration, the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. There's an apostasy law, the blasphemy law. All of these are part of the conversation on the apostasy law specifically is restricting the act of renouncing or abandoning one's religion. Restricting the act of insulting or showing contempt or lack of reverence for God. These are still so we're trying to help all of our students understand all of these concepts. So we can see through time that there have been changes introduced in the legal structures and frameworks, especially when it comes to religious freedom and religious regulation. So all of these laws in Mongolia, some of them are legal frameworks, some of them are just kind of organic laws, and I appreciate your attention as we've talked about all of these things.
First and foremost, I would like to introduce you to Mongolia briefly. And Mongolia is a landlocked country located in Central Asia, nestled between Russia and to the north and China to the south. With a rich history that dates back thousands of years, Mongolia is renowned for its vast, stunning landscapes, from the towering Altai Mountains to the expansive Gobi Desert. In the last 35 years, Mongolia has undergone a remarkable transformation, evolving from a socialist state to a vibrant democracy. Our legal framework is based on Roman and German legal system, and despite having a population of only approximately 3.5 million, we have made significant strides in terms of development and modernization. Mongolia's culture is deeply rooted in nomadic traditions and profound respect for nature, and our people take immense pride in our heritage. Today we are working toward a future that honors our traditions while embracing the opportunities of a rapidly changing world. So many our previous speech people mentioned about this too, but since 1206, under the reign of Genghis Khan, Mongolia has supported religious diversity. Throughout the history, many different religions have thrived here. From 15th to 19th century, Buddhism became the dominant faith. During the socialist era, religion was suppressed for 70 years. But since 1990, our constitution has ensured that all faiths can exist freely. Mongolia respects religious freedom and diversity, and these rights are protected by the constitution and the law on religions between and the state and religious institutions. Article 16 of the Mongolian constitution clearly states, a citizen of Mongolia shall be ensured that full and unequivocal exercise of the rights to freedom of thought and conscience and religion. Similarly, according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the rights to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. These rights include freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in the community with others, and public or private, manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. As a member of the UN, Mongolia has ratified the Human Rights Declaration and International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. There is no official state religion, but Buddhism is the majority faith, and our laws promote respect for it. We hope we can all agree that religion is a very, very delicate issue, particularly in a country like Mongolia, with a population of just 3.5 million. Religious freedom is not just a matter of individuals' right, it is also closely tied to our national security too. Religion shapes visions and mindsets and influences how people think and act. In a smaller country where social cohesion and stability are intimately linked to national unity, religious divisions or unrest can have far-reaching consequences. Because of this, the way we handle religious freedom is crucial for preserving our peace and protecting our national interests. It's essential to recognize that religion is merely about belief systems. It touches on every aspect of life, impacting both individuals and larger society. Despite these protections, they mentioned about this too, challenges remain for religious minorities. Specifically, many minority churches face significant hurdles. They often cannot register with the government, leading to fear among congregants. Many believe that conducting their services without permission is akin to committing a crime. The state does not permit the registration of new minority churches. For the last 30 years, most religious minority communities have struggled to gain the necessary permissions. And since 2017, no new religious organization has received registration that involved religious minorities. There is a disagreement with faith-based NGOs too, which hampers their ability to operate effectively. The state consistently monitors and inspects churches, pressuring them to either register or shut down. This environment of scrutiny creates an atmosphere where religious leaders often feel criminalized because they cannot obtain the required permits. Many inspections are conducted in a manner that is intimidating and threatening, instilling fear among religious leaders and their followers. No religious minority colleges in Mongolia that prepare future religious leaders are able to obtain necessary permissions. Due to the lack of authorization, many religious leaders are unable to participate in social insurance programs and cannot secure retirement benefits. Many missionaries from abroad face difficulties in obtaining religious visas. Foreign citizens often do not feel free to exercise their religious beliefs and rights. Current policies that prioritize the protection of the religious majority impose limitations on religious minorities. Due to the lack of permits, religious organizations are unable to officially own properties, etc. We have so many problems have to solve about this religious freedom and rights. Even though Mongolian religious groups can coexist peacefully, which is a vital tradition in our country, most persecutions do not stem from regular citizens or other religious followers, but rather from government officials, complicating the situation further. Most religious minority churches have struggled for 30 years, with some unable to obtain permission even after 10 or 5 years. Since 2017, I mentioned about this, no new church has been able to gain new registration that involved religious minorities. In reality, Mongolian religious minorities are not particularly interested in bringing their issues to the international level. Instead, they are focused on resolving their problems within the framework of the state. As I mentioned earlier, religious is a very delicate issue. Why am I telling you there is a religious persecution in Mongolia? I name it as a kind of silent persecution because it's not really extreme, not killing, not bomb, but there is a persecution. Before we proceed, I would like to take a moment to clarify the organization I represent here today, Civil Rights and Development NGO. As a human rights lawyers and professors from various universities in Mongolia, we initiated a civil society organization named our Civil Rights and Development. And we protect human rights. We have implemented several projects focused on human rights, religious freedom and rights, and capacity building of lawyers. Since 2017, we have been dedicated to building the capacity of religious leaders in Mongolia. It was many other religious leaders too. To date, we have trained approximately 800 religious leaders and conducted case studies on their conditions regarding religious freedom and right. My speech is based on this case study. We are addressing this challenge by training religious leaders and followers about their rights and freedom, and advocating for policy changes, publishing materials on religious freedom and religious leaders, hosting workshops and discussions with government officials, and promoting research on religious freedom. The results so far, and religious leaders and their followers are becoming more empowered and giving them greater confidence to stand up for their rights, their religious freedom and rights. Some government officials have shown greater openness, but there is still much work we have to do. Imagine for a moment being unable to practice your faith freely, living in a constant fear that your beliefs could lead to harassment or persecution. This is the reality for many religious leaders all around the world today. Their voices deserve to be heard and their rights protected. Together we can advocate for a world where everyone, regardless of their beliefs, can live freely and peacefully. In conclusion, I urge you all to reflect on the importance of religious freedom, not just as a fundamental human right, but as a cornerstone of a peaceful and cohesive society. Let us stand together to protect the rights of all individuals to practice their faith openly and without any fear. Thank you.
So many thanks to our excellent panelists presenting a wide range of views and information. I'm also grateful to them for leaving some time for discussion, because I find that's often the most enriching and interesting part of a conference. So we have a few minutes. Perhaps we can take a comment or two and then let our panelists respond to them. So questions? Sure. If you can speak into the microphone for the interpreters, please.
Yes.
Maybe introduce yourself so the interpreters have a second to tell which
Do you have it?
language you're going to speak.
I'm Jonathan Toronto. I am an attorney for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I've had a chance in prior assignments with the church to spend a little time following in Mongolia the laws and developments. I noticed several of our panelists talked about registration of religions and gave really interesting commentary about that. I know in prior United States State Department reports looking at Mongolia, giving an overview, they've also talked about registration as potentially a tool for oppression or for slowing the growth of religion. I'm just curious whether any of the panelists see hope in this regard, progress, if it feels status quo, getting worse, or if we're making improvement. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. We'll take one or two more questions and then have some discussion. Over here.
Hi, Drew Clark with the Media Broadband Breakfast. I'm fascinated by the discussion and don't know much about Mongolia, but the first thing that strikes me is you're in a kind of a rough neighborhood over there. And so I'm just wondering, given there are challenges with freedom of religion that were highlighted, I would be interested in your contrast with Russia and China, your two neighbors in your landlocked country, and how that influences or doesn't influence your attitude towards freedom of religion.
Thank you. Those are both good questions. Maybe we'll let you take turns. Would one of you like to address? We've got the registration laws and reference to China and Russia.
За би улсын бүртгэлийн асуултанд хариулъя. За Монгол улсад бол түрүүний хэлсэнчлэн миний танилцуулга илтгэл дээр гарсан 2009 оны улсын бүртгэлийн багц тухай хууль хэрэгждэг. За энэ хуулийн этгээдийн улсын бүртгэлийн тухай хуулийн дагуу одоо шашны байгууллагыг бол онцгойлон хуулийн этгээдийн статус дугаар
the religious organizations are not registered as a legal entity every time. Okay, I have it. Okay, we're ready.
За би энэ бүртгэлийн асуултанд хариулъя гэж байгаа.
I want to answer the question on the registration laws.
Улсын бүртгэлийн тухай
Law on state registration on legal entity. The state government doesn't register religious organizations as a legal entity. As NGO, all the different organizations are registered under one type of organization.
We don't issue permission to run to run, and we don't treat religious organizations any differently than any other organizations. We do registration for everybody, so that there's no sort of permission. So we're not granting permits. We're just doing a registration. So there's a law about registrations. We pull in the registrations that come in, and so it has nothing to do with the kind of religion that they're running. So there's nothing for us to be persecuting some religion. We're just trying to look at the law and interpret it and make our registrations. So in terms of NGOs and religious organizations, we don't even sort of look at what kind of activities they're running or what kind of religion they are. In terms of Russia and China, there's the right to worship and the right to not worship. We have to understand that part too. So I think compared to Russia and China, we certainly are much more democratic and free. There is regulation that we have, but we're trying to we're
When
it comes to our neighboring countries, Russia and China, the freedom of religion, relationship between state and religion. When you look at the indicators on the relations between state and religion, when it comes to Mongolia, I think we have a very open relationship when it comes to religion. Our country, in Russia and China, there's new religious activities, and they can't register their religion, and they can't gather, and they can't have a religious activity. And when it comes to Mongolia, it's open to have religious activity in Mongolia. And then there's 3.5 million people in Mongolia, and 60% of Mongolians have some type of religion. When it comes in Mongolia, there's a need to increase the education of the people about religions and freedom of religion and religions, all the different religions in the world. So that's why I teach the religious classes in college. Students in my class, after they graduate college, they come they have open opinions about how we should have freedom of opinion, and everybody has a right to freedom of religion.
unless you want to make a comment, we can go on with another. Probably have time for about another question or maybe two. We have.
There, Caleb Brimhall. I'm an attorney with Kurt McConkie. Thanks for your comments. In your presentations, you talked about potentially a move towards secularism as being maybe one of the sources of the tension between the religious freedom. And I just had a question: is there any open hostility towards religion, or is it really an attempt to really separate church and state that's creating that tension?
Thank you. Do we have another question as well? No? All right, well, we'll go with that for now, and please, if you'd like to respond.
Sorry, repeat your question again.
So there was some discussion about an attempt to make sure that there was a separation of church and state, almost going to a secular state. And I was just curious, is there open hostility towards religious freedom from government officials, or is it really just an attempt to make sure that the two are separated? And is that where the tension is coming in regards to religious freedom, or are there open hostility towards religious freedom and religions generally?
За энэ мэг асуулттай байна. Ааха. За айгуу шашингуу үзлийг одоо
So-
хийж байгаа гэдэг агуулгаараасаа байна.
So there's no sort of support of not having religion or true secularism.
Одоогоор ямар зөрчилтэй
So there's not a lot of sort of religious
нөгөө талаас
combativeness going on, or
аль нэг шашны одоо
so it's
боолыг төрийн үйл ажиллагаатай холилдуулахгүй байх гэсэн.
so there's it's trying to have no one religion sort of dominating the discussion.
Шашин төрөд эднэ гэсэн ийм зарчмыг бид нар хуулиндаа тусгаад өгсөн. Үүний хүрээнд явж байдаг. Энэ дээр бол ямар нэгэн байдлаар шашныг одоо доош дарагдуулах.
So there's no law out there trying to sort of put religions down. They really are just trying to keep things separate between church and state.
Энэ дээр бол ингэж байна. Хүний эрх өөрөө
So
эрхээ эзэлсэн ч болно, эзлэхгүй байсан ч болно гэдэг. Хувийн сонголтоос.
so there's a personal decision to have a religion or not have a religion. So you can choose to worship or choose not to worship. That's also a valid choice. That's just a personal decision. So the government should have nothing to do with that decision at all. So the other two talked about it. So there's laws respecting religious freedom, but there might be some difficulties in applying them properly. So trying to put, so people don't really understand religion sometimes, and so the lack of understanding and knowledge might cause mistakes to be made. So in the past, they in socialism they looked at Marx and Lenin talked about religion as a drug, right? And so there are still probably some people who look at it maybe a little bit that way. So when they're maybe even when they're doing registrations and things like that, maybe they're misunderstanding the purpose of some of these religious organizations. But there certainly isn't any specific or deliberate trying to put. We don't have really extremism like they talk about. That's an excuse for having a truly secular state. We have some of that maybe in Europe, but not. We don't have any of that. But we're just trying to make sure that everybody has the right to worship or not worship. I want to add one more thing to this. There's one thing I totally agree with, that education is so important. We talk about cults, right? And sometimes people are looking at things as cults and they don't understand what the difference is. We've been a democracy for only 35 years. So it's only one generation. So you have people who were, very few people who were born in that tradition. So we probably don't have a deep enough understanding of some of these issues. So why do we have this issue of people misunderstanding or looking down on certain religions? It's probably due to lack of religion. Nobody has anything against Islam, but there is terrorism that happens. Nobody has a problem with Christianity, but there can be Christian groups that have extreme views. So some people might take one small group and say, oh well, this is what Islam is, and there might be terrorists anywhere there. Somebody might look at Christianity and look at that because there are small groups. So how do we really understand the differences between some of these groups? So just like he's been saying, it really is important to have better religious education to help people understand the differences between and within religious traditions. So what's the difference between just a regular Christian group, and are there situations where, in fact, the state should intervene because there are problems with a group? So we just need the capability to be improved. I need to if there's time, I'll add one more thing. Religious groups. It's the actual permits and permission are being granted by the local governments. So there are some problems probably with our religious law, and so that's why we're trying to reform it. There's a meeting of citizens representatives that got together, so that they were trying to decide which religious organizations were okay, and in the Constitution, the freedom is guaranteed. But when you get down to the details of what should be regulated, it's harder for us to understand what we should do. So everybody has the right to worship or not worship. But just like we're saying, there's lots of different groups in the middle of this. We're trying to understand. So we need to understand and respect the law, as well as understanding and respecting religious institutions.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to hear from all of you and the interaction together. We appreciate your expertise. We appreciate your comments. Maybe the audience can join me in a round of applause in thanking our panelists.